Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight. Poland's foreign minister wants Russia suspended from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Radosław Sikorski believes the same should apply to Russia's membership in the UN Security Council. More on that in a moment, but first let's take a look at the latest headlines. Russia closes the Polish consulate in St. Petersburg and expels its diplomats. Romania's presidential elections are affected by alleged Russian cyber attacks, authorities say. And police raid the offices of Georgian opposition parties as protests continue. Poland's foreign minister is calling for Russia to be expelled from the UN Security Council as well as the OSCE, Europe's regional security forum, as long as Russian troops remain in Ukraine. Our chief political correspondent, Aaron Demon, reports from Malta.
It's been a dramatic 24 hours in Malta at the 31st OSCE Ministerial Council meeting. Remember, delegations from all 57 member states are here, and that includes Russia. And it was clear very early on that Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, his appearance would mean this was anything but smooth sailing. We spoke to foreign ministers as they arrived this morning at the council meeting, and here's what they told us.
And there was a high praise for the Maltese chairmanship that has prioritized support Ukraine, doing really important work on documenting evidence and proof of Russia's war crimes in Ukraine. And also the support program for Ukraine is providing assistance both in existential issues such as demining, but also for violence against women and rehabilitation and many other things. So that's an important thing.
Russia is isolated, yeah.
Do you have any message to Mr. Lavrov?
Get out of Ukraine. That's my message.
We will not allow Putin to bomb our common peace order into dust and ashes, nor will we allow Russia to play its cynical game of undermining the foundational pillars of OSCE uncommented. The OSCE is and will remain a central piece of our European security architecture.
So certainly not a welcome mat for Sergei Lavrov. He did finally arrive, and he arrived late to this ministerial council meeting. And of course, as journalists, we wanted to ask him some questions. Here's how that went.
Are you open to peace talks? Mr. Minister, are you open to peace talks?
Absolute radio silence from Mr. Lavrov, but that was no longer the case once he got inside the building. And as he started his address to the delegates, well, some started to get on up and leave. That included Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski and a few other delegates. I spoke exclusively to Minister Sikorski just a few hours later on why he did it, and he went one step further. Here's what he told me.
Mr. Lavrov is coming here to lie about Russian invasion and what Russia is doing in Ukraine, and I'm not going to listen to those lies. Russia corrupts every organization she joins. We need Russia to get out of Ukraine, and only then will this organization make sense.
When he talks about the organisation being paralysed, what he means is that for all decisions made by the OSCE, they have to come to a consensus. All 57 member states have to sign off on a decision. That's almost impossible with the likes of Russia and Belarus involved. And so Poland's top diplomat is putting a line in the sand. In Malta, for TVP World, I'm Aaron Darman.
Moscow will close down the Polish consulate in St. Petersburg in early 2025. The move is regarded as the Kremlin's response to Poland closing the Russian consulate in Poznań last month. Russia had no right to make this decision, says Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski, speaking on the sidelines of the 31st Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe Ministerial meeting in Malta. Our reporter, Karolina Stolzman, has more.
According to the Russian Foreign Ministry, the Polish consulate in St. Petersburg will close on January 10, 2025.
In accordance with the principle of reciprocity, 3 diplomatic employees of the Consulate General of Poland in St. Petersburg have been declared persona non grata and must leave the territory of Russia by the specified date.
Russia didn't really have the right for this, to this retaliation.
This move comes in response to Poland closing down a Russian consulate in Poznań last week.
I took the decision to close down the Russian consulate in Poznań as a sign of our displeasure and outrage at the Russian campaign of arsons in Poland and beyond.
The Polish Foreign Ministry has previously limited the areas of Poland where Russian diplomats are allowed to travel. Sikorski called the decision to close the Poznań consulate down a warning.
We know what you're doing. We have proof that you're doing it. Stop doing it. And if you don't, we'll take further action.
Sikorski has a precise idea of what that might be.
And if acts of diversion and terrorism continue, I will close down the rest of Russian consular presence in Poland.
For now, it remains unclear whether Poland will take any action in response to the closure of the St. Petersburg consulate.
The Czech Republic may hold thousands of Russian citizenship applications, citing security concerns. Supporters defend the move, while critics call it discriminatory. Our correspondent Sasha Fabach reports from Prague.
Now, according to the Czech foreign minister, there have been over 500 suspicious attacks across Europe, 100 of them apparently attributed to Russia. Now, this region is no stranger to Russian aggression. Now, the Czech Republic wants to go even further. There is a new amendment to a Czech law which will make it even harder for Russian nationals who want to become Czech citizens, and that is causing controversy.
Ever since the Kremlin labeled the Czech Republic an official enemy, fears over national security have prompted a controversial legislative move. A proposed amendment to the Czech law known as Lex Ukraine 7 would force Russian nationals to renounce their citizenship if they wish to become Czech citizens. Surprisingly, the bill comes from the Liberal Stand Party, but its implications have left experts and politicians divided. Critics argue the law unfairly targets dual citizens and violates the principles of equality, branding it discriminatory.
It's a matter of principle. It's basically not a matter of Russians or any other nationality. Basically, what is right, if there is a law, you can have only one citizenship, it has to apply to everyone. If there is a law, you can have several citizenships or dual citizenship. It has to apply to everyone.
Supporters, however, cite a growing wave of hybrid attacks across Europe as justification, insisting the measure is essential to protect the Czech Republic from potential threats.
This existing law covers the persons who are at the moment, say, dangerous for democracy in Czech Republic or for interests of Czech Republic. Second is that we are talking here about community and about the people who can be in the future blackmailed from Russia.
But constitutional experts disagree, suggesting the country already has adequate safeguards in place to address security risks tied to nationality.
The actual Czech citizenship law already has enough instruments how to deal with the security problems, because according to the actual law, you can deny to give the citizenship to the applicant if you have some suspects, and you have no to reason it, and he has no right to go to the court.
When confronted, the bill's sponsor hinted at possible exceptions, yet the core of the proposal has been met with opposition. Some lawmakers see it as a populist move designed to win voter approval ahead of next year's parliamentary elections.
I don't see the supposed impact of this amendment because I see threats in different places, in a new application of Russian citizens. So I don't understand why we should focus on people who live here for years, decades. So what is the reason? We want to divide families, we want to destroy, partnership. So Even we should focus on companies or enterprises with the Russian influence who wants to buy property here.
If passed, the amendment would affect only a fraction of the 35,000 Russians currently residing in the Czech Republic, primarily those recently applying for citizenship. But the bill has already created ripples among the Russian diaspora, many of whom fled Vladimir Putin's regime and now feel stigmatized by the very country they sought refuge in.
All my family, all my colleagues, we are unwanted people in Czech Republic then. So that is, they are not considered, well, they could consider us as the holder of the residence permit, but they not considered us, even in theory, as citizens.
The amendment remains under debate in Parliament, with delays reflecting a divide over its necessity and fairness. Whether it passes or not, the proposal has stirred controversy, polarized public opinion, and left lasting scars on those Russians who dreamt of building a new life in Europe.
This law sends me and other people like me a message that they still view me not as a successfully integrated immigrant, as a completely realized member of the society, but as something that is foreign.
If adopted, this law could set a precedent for other nations in the region to follow. But for now, it serves as a stark reminder of how geopolitics and national security concerns can reshape the lives of individuals caught in the crossfire. Sasha Farbach for TVP World in Prague.
Romania's outgoing president, Klaus Iohannis, has released a series of declassified documents pointing to massive foreign interference in the ongoing presidential elections. The news comes amid broader concerns of the Kremlin meddling in internal affairs of the whole region. Franciszek Pilis reports.
The first round of Romania's presidential election has left the country and EU observers in shock, as a candidate previously considered a mystery man by established politicians placed first on the podium. Călin Georgescu, described by analysts as right-wing, populist and pro-Russian, is an independent candidate whose success in the election trumps his claims of not spending any money on campaigning. Those claims, combined with the fact that almost his entire campaign was conducted on the social media app TikTok, raised eyebrows among voters, the candidates and the courts.
It's not reasonable from an analytical perspective to place that person as having an actual chance to enter the second round first, not to mention to actually lead the first round. So this is the exceptional element, the fact that he really spiked in the past 2-3 days before the first round of presidential elections.
These concerns were compounded by documents released on Wednesday by the outgoing president Klaus Iohannis, which reveal some disturbing facts. Despite both Georgescu and TikTok denying claims that his online campaign content had benefited from paid promotion, the documents reveal that one TikTok account had made payments of almost 362,000 euros since October 24th to users who were boosting the independent candidate.
We also have learned that more than 50 million euros have been invested on TikTok, while he declared the electoral authority that no money has been spent, which, by the way, is illegal, and he'll most likely end up in prison.
What's more, Romanian intelligence agencies say they've reported upwards of 85,000 attempts to hack into the country's election system with the goal of accessing electoral data and changing content. The attacks are believed to have originated in Russia. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski said these claims should not be downplayed or ignored.
Please also note the Romanian government's just released report on the gigantic scale of external interference in the country's politics through social media. This is something that both the media and the political world should take with deadly seriousness.
He also said that Poland expects NATO to focus on combating Russian disinformation and election interference ahead of the upcoming Polish presidential elections. These comments follow a wave of interference concerns surrounding the recent Georgian parliamentary elections and Moldova's presidential elections.
I think if you're a member of the European Union right now and you're having elections soon, like Poland will have, right? You better look very, very careful to what's happening in Romania right now, because you are next.
With Moscow's ambitions to orchestrate world politics on the rise, Western politicians and leaders stress the need for unity in their fight against Russian interference.
As protests in Georgia continue, police are now cracking down on opposition figures. On Wednesday, a leader of the Coalition for Change was knocked unconscious by police and detained. Our correspondent Tbilisi, Don Arlet, has more.
The ninth night of protests here in Tbilisi continuing
As you can see and hear behind me are tens of thousands of people that have gathered in front of the Parliament building yet again to demand new elections, the proper direction, which according to them is the European Union. This comes on the heels of yesterday's brutal police detainment of one of the leaders for the Coalition for Change. That individual is still being detained by police. We've had an update on the situation. He will be held between 3 and 15 days. He could be held up to 15 days without charges. Now, we talked to some of the opposition members at yesterday's emergency meeting on the news of this brutal detainment, and they told us exactly what they want from the international community. Take a listen.
We won the elections. The four political families of the opposition, the four coalitions, actually got more votes than the Georgian Dream government did. So they are not a legitimate government. They don't have any domestic or international recognition. It is a regime that is crumbling, so now we're calling for more sanctions. We're calling for more proactive actions from all the Western partners, from the EU, as well as from the United States of America. We need the international community to stand with the Georgian people in words as well as in deeds. We need Europe and America to act.
Now, Lithuania has already put sanctions on some of the members of the Georgian Dream Party. This, the opposition says, is crucial to breaking up the ruling coalition and potentially getting new elections, which is what all these protesters are demanding. Earlier, Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski also spoke on the issue when he was at the OSCE Ministerial meeting in Malta.
The gap between the previously reliable polls and exit polls and the announced election results was alarmingly large. We know that there was fraud, especially outside Tbilisi.
Now, in the meantime, people are going to continue to gather here and rally in support to have new elections that are both free and fair. They want to have the direction towards the European Union, not towards Russia. And that is exactly why everyone is coming out on the streets here in Georgia. Reporting from Tbilisi, Don Arleth, TVP World.
The search for a new prime minister in France continues. Michel Barnier will remain in office, but only as a caretaker prime minister and only until President Emmanuel Macron finds a replacement. The political crisis in Germany is deepening as well. Ovidiusz Nicieja has more.
French Prime Minister Michel Barnier resigned from office after losing a no-confidence vote. A disagreement over budget led both the left and the right to vote to oust the now shortest-serving Prime Minister in the history of the French Fifth Republic.
France is in a financial disarray at the moment. There is war in Europe, and there is also a lack of unity in Europe. This is completely irresponsible from our political parties. Now France is in total blockade.
Over in Germany, Olaf Scholz's government also seems doomed.
There will be a vote of no confidence to the Scholz government that is almost right now non-existent. The new coalition that will be forming during the duration of the next year, because I suppose that it will take some time for the biggest parties to coordinate their policies.
France and Germany are the European Union's two strongest economies, and the crises in Paris and Berlin come at a time when the war in Ukraine has triggered a new discussion on Europe's security. Poland, which in January takes over the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union, is now NATO's #1 defense spender relative to the size of its economy.
It's just a need, the real need to protect security in this part of the world. And Poland will be the guard of security. That's I'm sure about.
The Polish Prime Minister had a chance to discuss the priorities of the Polish presidency with the European Parliament President during her visit to Warsaw.
Poland, in fact, is in pole position to lead our union during our upcoming presidency of the Council at this very critical moment.
The Polish government perceives Russia as a threat. The three Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, shared this perspective. And it's Estonia's Kaja Kallas who on December 1st took over the role of European Union's foreign policy chief. Lithuania's Andrius Kubilius is now the EU Commissioner for Defense.
the new security architecture of Europe should be actually constructed against Russia.
Boosting Europe's deterrence and defense is now one of the priorities of the new EU Commission.
According to media reports, Ukraine's delegation, led by Andriy Yermak, a close associate of President Volodymyr Zelensky, has arrived in Washington to meet with Donald Trump's future national security advisor, Mike Waltz, and his Ukraine envoy, Keith Kellogg. What are the president-elect's plans for Ukraine? Will the Kremlin be willing to enter peace negotiations with the new US administration? And what does Kyiv think about it all? TVP World's Adam Yasser discussed these issues with the former special US representative for Ukraine, Kurt Volker. Let's listen.
Our guest tonight is Kurt Volker, a former US envoy to NATO and Ukraine. Good evening, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Ambassador, it's been now a month since Donald Trump was elected by the American people, partly on the promise to end the war in Ukraine. We have now seen and heard his appointees who are supposed to get this done. So with your experience and insight, what kind of a deal for Ukraine is emerging from this?
Well, I think what we should expect to see is very much what Trump said all along, even when he met with Zelensky back in September, or after his phone call with Zelensky after the election. He's going to call Putin, and he's going to urge Putin to stop the war. Now, I don't expect Putin will agree immediately. He'll have demands, but I think Trump will try to keep it simple and say, no, you stop the fighting. I think what Trump expects to see is a ceasefire pretty much in place, continued support for Ukraine so that they develop a strong position, and to try to address any other issues through diplomatic means rather than through the war.
Right,
what I think is unknown, yes, what I think is unknown is what Trump's position is going to be on Ukrainian NATO membership. I think that the key is not only stopping the fighting, which I think is doable, and I think Putin may be ready to stop fighting, but the key is going to be making this a permanent peace. How do you prevent Putin from attacking again? And there I see the only thing that would work is NATO membership. Other security assurances have never been convincing to Putin. But we don't yet know from Trump or his team if that is something they are considering, or if they are instead looking at a delay, putting down the road of NATO membership.
But, you know, where is this assumption that Putin is going to listen to Trump coming from? I mean, he hasn't been listening to anybody, and he's pushing his
that's
case.
Right. You're absolutely right. And I think what I expect is Putin not to listen to Trump. I think that he will say, I need this, I need that, I have all these demands. And Trump is going to say, no, just stop the war. And so I think it will be a disagreement for a while.
Right.
We do have some developments that are actually very interesting, though. I believe that Putin is in a far weaker position now than he was when he started this war 3 years ago. I think that his economy is in difficult shape. Inflation is very high, over 25%. Interest rates are 21% and rising. The ruble is falling. Things are getting more expensive in Russia. So I think he's got some difficulties there. He also has difficulties militarily. They are stretched. They can't protect Kursk and go on the offensive in Russia at the same time.
Right.
They don't want to do conscription, so they're bringing in North Koreans and Houthis. They don't have enough artillery shells, so they get them from North Korea. They get drones from Iran. They were not able to keep forces in Syria, so they lost Aleppo. So I think he's in a difficult shape militarily as well.
Right.
So I think Putin might be ready to take a pause.
But Mr. Ambassador, we sort of heard that for the past 3 years, that Russia is exhausted, that it's coming to the end of its resources, and yet they're advancing on the ground, slowly, but they're advancing. And the Europeans are divided, because some Europeans, you know, we're hearing from them, like from Mark Rutte, the new NATO Secretary General, that, you know, we will continue supporting Ukraine. He met with Mr. Trump in in Mar-a-Lago. So he's arguing that America and Europe will continue supporting Kiev, and he's saying Russia, he's more or less saying the same things as you're saying, that Russia can't win this war. But then we have Viktor Orban, who claims to have Mr. Trump's ear, and he says he hears a different story from Mr. Trump. He just came out saying, Mr. Trump told him that he will cut off funding for Ukraine, and he will put more pressure on Ukraine to end the conflict than on Russia.
I don't think that Orban is a reliable interlocutor here. I think he says what he wants to say, in particular to try to please Putin. The reality is you don't need to put any pressure on the Ukrainians to negotiate at all. They're ready. They're very happy to end this conflict. It has to be reasonable. Has to be in a way that respects the idea of Ukraine's sovereignty and independence. But Ukrainians are ready to talk. And in fact, we have President Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, in Washington today. And he's meeting with Keith Kellogg, the designated Ukraine envoy, as well as Mike Waltz, the designated national security advisor. So they're already in a position where they are beginning this idea of engagement with the Trump administration about trying to secure peace.
Right. You know these people very well. You have been in U.S. diplomacy for years. You know these people personally. Do you think they and Zelensky and Yermak and his team speak the same language? Can they agree on a solid foundation to then negotiate with Putin?
Yeah, I do, actually. I was very encouraged, I have to say, by Zelensky's meeting with Trump in New York in September. They gave two press availabilities, two stand-ups, one before the meeting, one after the meeting. And in the one after the meeting, Trump came out and said, we had a great discussion. We agree on having peace. It has to be a fair peace. And he has a great relationship with Putin. He's going to call Putin and tell him to stop the war. I thought that was a very encouraging press conference from Trump, because it seemed to me that he understood that this can't be a failure. This can't be what appears to be a loss for Trump or weakness on Trump's part. I think he looks at the failure in Afghanistan during the Biden administration, the absolute catastrophic withdrawal. And I think he realizes that he does not want that to be his legacy.
Well, except that U.S. troops are not involved in Ukraine, so it's a different story.
That's right, but U.S. prestige is involved in Ukraine. And the way it appears in the world, the thing about Afghanistan is not that he wanted to stay in Afghanistan. Trump did not want to stay in Afghanistan, but it made the U.S. appear weak. Right. And lacking resolve. And
okay,
that's what he
let
wants
me ask you another question. Does Trump and people around him, do they listen to Central Europeans and their concerns? Poland, which is a staunch ally of Ukraine, is backing its push to join NATO. Does it make a difference, or is it really between Trump, Putin, and Zelensky?
Yeah. So first off, Trump makes his own decisions. I don't think that he's getting, influenced from his team. Rather, he's trying to use his team to implement his decisions. So Trump very much makes his own mind up. Secondly, I think they have a very favorable view of Poland. They had a very good relationship between the Trump administration and Poland during his first term. I think that has carried over to a positive attitude toward Poland now. Now, I don't think they're going to listen to Poland and say, Poland says bring Ukraine into NATO, so we'll do it. But I think when it comes to respect for Poland, having U.S. military presence in Poland, Poland pulling its share of the defense burden in Europe, leading on defense spending and support for NATO, I think all those things make a difference. And I want to come back to something you said about Mark Rutte. I think Mark did meet with President Trump. He is speaking, I think, with some knowledge of Trump's position, when he says that we have to keep supporting Ukraine and that NATO needs to do this. And I think what Rutte is saying is Europe needs to do more. Europe should be stepping up. It's not a matter of just the United States continuing to support Ukraine, but Europe needs to step up to do more. And if he can deliver that, I think that's going to be seen very favorably by Trump.
Okay. Let's go back to the question of how this possible deal might look like. And correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but it seems Kyiv is basically resigned to trading some territory for peace and security. And of course, NATO membership comes into the picture. Is this something that Trump is likely to accept? NATO membership as a security guarantee?
Yeah, first off, I don't agree that we could call it trading land to Russia for peace, because no one is suggesting that
excuse me, a lot of people on the Trump camp have been suggesting that openly, publicly.
Yeah, but no, I don't believe that. That is not the case. Ukraine is going to maintain its position that Russia is occupying Ukrainian territory and needs to leave. They're not going to recognize that this territory now belongs to Russia.
But that's another matter. That's a sort of legal wrangle, perhaps long term. But in the short term, are they ready to accept that they will have to accept a ceasefire on the front line where it is now?
Yes, no, on that, yes. The idea that you do not take the territory back militarily, that you pursue recovering the territory by other means, diplomatic, etc., then yes, I think the Ukrainians are ready for that. There was an interview that President Zelensky gave to Sky News last week in which he was very clear about this and said that we can imagine a situation where we stop the hot phase of the war and we pursue getting our territory back by diplomatic and political means, but we have a ceasefire. But we need to have, as Ukraine speaking, we need to have clear, reliable security guarantees, and that means NATO membership. And that is very much where the Ukrainian position is now. And again,
Mr. Ambassador,
I want to stress that this is aligning the Ukrainian position with where he believes the Trump position can be. He's met with Trump in New York. He's spoken with him on the phone. I think they are trying to align.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your insight.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
That was TVP World's Adam Yassa in an interview with Kurt Volker, former US ambassador to NATO. And that's all we have prepared for now. Thank you for watching and stay with us for much more news and features here on TVP World.